lot of professing believers that don't connect the meeting of God with receiving something from God. And it's true of the Lord's table. Sister Becky said something one time, and never forgot it, in early renewal. She said, if you don't come in anticipation of receiving something from God, you're not going to get anything from God. But on the vice versa there, if you do, then you will.
Amen.
And this table at its very institution was a feast. The Last Supper, as it's been deemed, a time when Jesus parted the bread and gave the cup. And he's still doing that. So I encourage you in this time to anticipate receiving something from him. He anticipates giving it. 2 Timothy 2:8 is what I'm going to look at tonight. It's a familiar text there. Brother Aaron spoke from that this morning in communion meditation. This isn't going to be a ditto. We have some different things to see here. I want to draw out a phrase there. The text reads, remember that Jesus Christ, of the seed of David, that's what I want to draw out, was raised from the dead according to my gospel. Remember, Jesus is the one that was of the seed of David. Remember that.
Yeah.
Now, the lives of godly people were orchestrated by God to be a source of learning to us. And we have this in a number of texts of Scripture. Romans 15:4 puts it this way. Whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope. And that's true. More particularly, certain men were picked out as a type of Christ himself. See? For example, this is something that was said of Moses. It said, the Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me.
Yeah.
And that's who David is. He is a man that's like unto Jesus. And so we can look at the life of David with the knowledge that we have of Christ, and actually becomes a point of great edification for us. David was like him. Now, one important thing about David that relates to the cross and Christ's qualifications in that cross is that David began very humble. Our introduction to David in the Scriptures was not David the king.
That's
It
right.
was to David the shepherd.
Yeah.
You may recall
Yeah.
God was taking the kingdom away from Saul and was going to use Samuel to anoint someone from the house of Judah. He went to look at these different sons that he had. And on that occasion, even Samuel kind of stumbled a little bit here. He caused for all the sons to pass before him. Remember this?
Yeah.
You remember what Samuel thought when he saw Eliab?
Yeah.
He's the oldest.
Yeah.
Ah, this is the one.
Yeah.
This is the one. You remember what God said to Samuel at that time? Look not on his countenance, or on the height of his stature. I don't have any doubt he probably had similar qualities of Saul. Remember, Saul stood head and shoulders above everybody. I don't have any doubt that he had this tough kind of a look about him that would make for a king, to be administrator and to rule. And no doubt Eliab had some of those qualities, but he told him, don't look at his stature. I've refused him. Eliab wouldn't have made a king like David. He wouldn't have been as good a king. The Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart.
Amen.
Now here's our introduction to David. Samuel said to Jesse, are these all the children? And he said, well, there remains yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. Now, if you were going to set a man on the throne of Judah, would your first qualification be a shepherd?
Yeah.
No, I don't suppose it would be. But that was what it was. Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him. Fetch the boy. The boy. For he will not sit down, we will not sit down till he come hither.
Amen.
And he sent and brought him in, and here's the Scripture's comments about David. He was ruddy, and withal of a beautiful countenance, and goodly to look to. In other words, David had soft qualities about him.
Yeah. That's right.
You wouldn't look at David and say, man of war like Goliath. That's not what you saw when you looked at David. You saw a pretty boy. That's how we say it today. He's a pretty boy. That's what he was. See? He was humble in his stature. That's our introduction to David. That's something.
Yes, amen.
It reminds me of something that's said of Jesus. Now here's Jesus' humiliation. Being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross.
Yeah.
See? Now, here's an example of his humiliation that we find in Isaiah 53:2. Remember, humbled himself, he became a man. That was the humbling fact.
Yeah.
Became a man. Here's what Isaiah 53:2 has to say about it. He shall grow up before him as a tender plant and as a root out of dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. Now, this is not what that... It doesn't mean this. He was an ugly man. That's not what he means.
Yeah.
The prophet is considering the Christ.
Yeah.
This is the one that would please God.
Yeah.
This is the one that would take away all the sins of the world. This is the one that would ultimately be exalted to administer this great salvation. And there was nothing you saw in the appearance of Jesus that led you to believe he was qualified to do any of that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just as it was with David. You look at David and you think king, ruler. You didn't think that when you looked at David. It's what was on the inside.
Yeah.
And so it was with Jesus. There he is
Yes. Amen.
in his humble state. And yet David did not remain in that humble state. did he?
Amen.
David wasn't always a shepherd, was he?
Mm-mm.
The time came for him to be exalted, and he became a great and productive, one of the best kings you'd ever have was David. Productive king, expanding the kingdom, ruling with the mind of God. See? And we can't have Jesus merely in a humble state either. See, Jesus dying isn't enough. We had to have Jesus exalted.
Amen.
That Philippians text goes on to tell us, wherefore God hath highly exalted him and given him a name which is above every name. All power. Heaven and earth be given to him. Every knee shall bow. Shall bow. Why? Well, Ephesians 4 says it this way. He that descended is the same also that descended far up above the heavens, that he might fill all things. That's why. So what does fill all things mean? He gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. That's why. He had to receive all power so that he could save us and make us his body. See, so there you have the humiliation and the exaltation as it was with David. More than that, David was said to be a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
You remember when Paul was given that open door in Antioch to speak in a synagogue, one of the things that he declared in his overview?
Yeah.
This is what he had to say about David. When he had removed him, he raised up unto them David to be their king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after mine own heart, which shall fulfill all my will.
Ooh, praise God.
He said a lot there to say a man
Amen.
after his own heart.
Amen.
See? Let me give you a little interpretation of that. David had a profound love for God himself.
Yes.
And that was the guarantee that he would do the will of God. Reminds me of something John said. This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. If men can ever love God, they'll do what he says. God says, this man loves me, and he's going to do my will. Now we have this word confirmed from David himself, one of the profound expressions of David's love toward God. Very common, popular phrase amongst God's people. One thing have I desired of the Lord. Of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. David loved God. And thus David had a high esteem for God's commands. Commands don't just represent what's right and what's wrong. Commands give direction to the purpose of God. David knew this, and that's why he had such a strong attraction to the commands of God. See, he didn't have all the knowledge you have. The commands were a chief way of David to understand what God's will was. See? And one of the Psalms that deals directly with David's love of God's commands is Psalm 119. A lot of expressions here. But here's one Psalm 119, 6 through 8 says, Then shall I not be ashamed when I have respect unto all thy commandments. I will praise thee with an uprightness of heart. When I shall have learned thy righteous judgments, I will keep thy statutes. Oh, forsake me not utterly.
Amen.
So God's love, or David's love for God, compelled him to keep the commandments. And so it is with Jesus. The chief commandment Jesus received from God, lay down your life. Take it up again. And that's how he saw it. Here's something that Jesus had to say about his own love for the Father. He said, Hereafter I will not talk much with you, for the prince of the world cometh and hath nothing in me, but that the world may know that I love the Father.
Yeah.
You were not enough to get Jesus to the cross. The greater and deeper compelling factor was God wanted this done.
Amen.
And Jesus loved God. And so he goes on to say in that text, As the Father hath given me commandment, even so I do. See, thank God for that parallel. Man after God's own heart. One last thing. David was a mighty man of war. In fact, that was one of the reasons why he couldn't build the temple, is because of his great conquest for the kingdom. He was a bloody man. Not a bloody man like a violent man we think of today, but one that was extending the will of God in the kingdom by warfare. He did this. He did this. In fact, he even did something that no other man could do. He slayed Goliath. The only one to do it. The only one to do it. You may recall that occasion there in 1 Samuel 17. Israel had set up in battle array against the Philistines. And this was a twist they hadn't planned on. One man came out from amongst the Philistines and challenged to a one-on-one combat with someone from Israel. Okay? It was quite an occasion. There are a lot of things to note about that are similar with the cross. One thing that was noted is that the warfare took place in the valley of Elah.
Yeah.
And so it is with humanity. Where Jesus died, humanity was all in a valley.
Yeah.
In low places.
Yeah.
Low places. Another thing to see about that battle is that Goliath was a champion.
Yeah.
And so was the devil.
Yeah.
He had fought the devil to the time that Jesus came to confront the powers of darkness and the cross. The devil had been a champion over the human race, so to speak.
That's right.
Slaying every one of us. And when Goliath chanted this call, it was interesting that the whole camp of Israel was struck with dismay and fear. What are we going to do? All afraid to challenge him. Not a man would step forward, not a one would step forward to do that. And so it was with us. The accusations of sin, God won't receive you. Look what you have done. It struck fear in the human race. And he controlled us by that.
Yeah.
By that fear. And it was a one-man battle.
That's right.
David did not pursue Goliath with assistance. Although Goliath did pursue David with an assistant, didn't he?
That's right. Amen.
Now the cross is a one-man battle. Jesus is the only one who made this redemption price. No other man could do it, but he did. Something that is said about that battle and its great victory, something Jonathan said to Saul, trying to commend David and encourage Saul to quit pursuing him. It said of that occasion, he put his life in his hand and slew the Philistine, and the Lord brought a great deliverance for all Israel.
Amen.
Man of war, mighty in battle. Here's something that's said of Jesus after he died and he's returned back to heaven. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be lifted up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? He's the man of war, mighty in battle.
Yeah. Amen.
I don't know anybody on the earth would have looked at the Jesus dying and would have said a man of war, mighty in battle. But that's what he was.
That's right.
In his death, he slew the devil. He plundered principalities and powers, robbing them. He destroyed the devil.
Yeah.
He pleased the Father.
Yeah.
He condemned sin.
Yes.
And he opened the door of salvation.
Amen.
See all these things in one act. Mighty man of battle. So see, When we come tonight to remember Jesus, we're remembering Jesus, who was the son of David.